Rick Yount, welcome to the Earthly Delights podcast. Thank you for coming on. What's the crack? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Seb. Doing well.
Uh,
I'm happy to be here and appreciate the chance to talk to you about what we're doing here at Warrior Canine Connection.
oh, absolutely, no problem. Absolute pleasure from our side. For people who maybe aren't aware, I spoke to Meg Dolmer and we did an amazing podcast with her, and she kind of opened my mind to what it is that the potential that dogs have. And within that, she spoke briefly about your association, your charity, and she got me into contact with you, thankfully. And so, for people who aren't aware of what it is that you guys do, could you just give us a brief outline of what it is that the Warrior Canine Connection does?
Yeah, certainly. The Warrior Canine Connection is it's a charity, as you mentioned. We breed golden retrievers and Labrador retrievers to become service dogs for veterans. What's really unique about our program model is that we engage veterans who are struggling with recovering from post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injuries, and we teach them how to help us train these dogs to become service dogs for their fellow battle buddies.
Perfect. And how did you get into this sector, into this field of research and help?
Yeah, I have been a licensed social worker for going back 30 plus years, but I was gifted a golden retriever puppy from two dear friends in the Christmas of 1995, and I was systematically trained by a then 8-week-old golden retriever puppy who every day when I was leaving to go to work would stare me down at the door, and one morning had convinced me that if I didn't take him, he would certainly succumb to his trauma. And so I took him to work with me, working with children in specialized foster care without a plan. I had no plan, but I knew that I had to take this puppy with me for those reasons.
And did you see a big change in the children once you took the puppy with you? And is that where the light bulb switched?
Yeah, the light bulb switched early in that morning that I took him. Received a call from Child Protective Services. We had to remove an 11-year-old boy from a very bad, you know, home situations, and so I arrived with the Child Protective Services worker and a 4-month-old golden retriever puppy, uh, and just we were taking this young man from everything he knew and taking him to live with a family he'd never met in a county that he'd never been. And he was just, his heart was broken. And
Mm.
this sobbing little boy was in the back of my car, all of a sudden went silent, probably 5 minutes into the drive. And I looked in my mirror and saw this golden retriever pup with his head in this little boy's lap. And that's how I fell into this field many years ago.
What a beautiful story. I mean, dogs do have that power. It's pretty incredible. I think I was saying to you before we started this podcast that I think anyone who's had dogs or pets of that matter, actually, or any animal, kind of recognize instinctively, intuitively that animals are good for us, that they make us better versions of ourselves. But I don't think we recognize how. And I don't think we understand how to harness that power. We just take it as like a byproduct of having a pet. Um, do you find that when you started this field and maybe even now that you've had resistance, or that you've people have kind of, when you've told people about what it is that you do, you maybe get an odd glance and, oh, that's a bit woo woo, or that's a bit far fetched? Or do people kind of readily accept the potential that dogs have to help veterans reintegrate into society and help them overcome their PTSD?
No, there was quite a bit of resistance back at the beginning of starting this. You had the looks of what are you doing with your dog? You're at work, and you had to develop the ability to kind of go past that. And as we say, the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
And those people that were giving me the odd looks, you know, soon afterwards, when they were dealing with a difficult situation with one of the families they were working with, they would call me over to bring my dog because it worked, and when you have something that works and works very, very well, it makes sense to explore that and
Mm,
continue doing it,
of course.
because frankly, there's a lot of things that don't work very well. So that's you know I, it breathed new life into my career, because when you're working with traumatized kids and families, it takes a tool if you care. Um, and when the tools that you have are not all that effective, and you're trying to change people's lives for the better, having tools that do work exceptionally well, just it makes a world of difference, to everyone involved.
And what took you from working with kids to then taking that leap and then working with veterans? Because, like you said, if you found something that's worked, why if it's not broke, don't fix it type thing. Why wouldn't you just stay in your sector? You've got a wealth of experience with kids, and now you've got this magic potion, which is a dog that can help you go further in that career. Why would you not kind of stay there and specialize there? What was the idea, or what led you to working with veterans?
Yeah, that's a great question. I stumbled upon a program where they were working with incarcerated teens and teaching them to train service dogs, uh, in an effort to build their self-esteem. And when I saw this program, from my perspective, I saw the parenting opportunities to teach parenting skills, um, in the dog training. And I was going into court very often, and testifying to a judge and saying, it's clear that these parents, they love their children, but it's also very clear that they can't safely or adequately parent them.
Hmm.
And the dog training to train service dogs, required a very tight bond with the dog that you were training, a relationship, and you had to be consistent, and you had to regulate your emotional state when the dogs were not following through with what you wanted them to do. And most importantly, you had to use an effective praise tone, a praise voice, to reinforce the behaviors. And I saw that as the four fundamental pillars of effective parenting.
Hmm.
And what really excited me at the time was, and still does, is that you had an opportunity there to experientially teach the core elements of effective parenting to teens you had identified as high risk before they had children. And I thought that would be the most sensible way to break the cycle of abuse and neglect, was to be able to give them the tools that they needed. And it's experiential learning. Something is the most powerful method of teaching. You can't teach patience by telling someone to be patient, you
Right.
know, but you can learn patience by practicing patience.
Right.
And again, to be able to see how having a relationship affects the responsiveness of these dogs, is really a great way to show the importance of having a bond or an attachment with your children as well.
Mm.
That's what really drew my attention to service dog training, and led me to get that training, um, to create a program back then. This was in 2001. My goal was to create a program working with teens in an alternative high school, teens that had been expelled from the county, the public school system, and to be able to teach them how to train service dogs for people in the community, again, to interfere with that cycle of abuse, and give them those skills. Um, the dogs that the teens helped to train, when it came time for them to be ready to graduate, I had several veterans who had applied for service dogs. That's when the shift really happened,
Right.
because I became aware that veterans were waiting for many, many years to find a service dog that was available, if there was one. And that's when the shift started. Um, this program model really came to be, I think, I would say in 2005. Um, PTSD was being talked about much more frequently, as you know, the very, very bloody times in Iraq and Afghanistan and Fallujah. And um, you know, you kind of wake up with an idea, and my idea was, who better to help train a service dog for a veteran than a veteran? And I started working on, you know, putting this idea on paper. And as a social worker, I knew about trauma and PTSD from the kids that I work with, but not specifically combat related trauma. And so I started studying more and trying to talk with veterans that were coming back from Iraq, and learning firsthand. And every symptom, or every symptom cluster for, you know, post traumatic stress disorder, I could find a very tangible way of how the training of these service dogs could be used to mitigate, you know, or address those symptoms. Um, it wasn't difficult to, you know, draw the parallels.
Right. And what's the, most, I imagine that most people listening to this podcast, the fact they've seen dog in the title or canine in the title, probably have clicked on it, and they're probably dog lovers themselves. So, but what's the difference between, what are the difference between having a pet just as a citizen, the general public like myself? I've got a Jack Russell, so the needs that I would want or need from a dog as a pet, to what a veteran needs from a service dog. What is the difference there?
Well, for a service dog, we're talking about dogs that, you know, have access to the, you know, the public, that feel comfortable going out into crowds and riding in, you know, trains and airplanes, and they go everywhere, with that veteran. Um, you know, there's a lot of similarities, I'm sure. You know, people and their pets, and what their pets do for them at home, um, and frankly, the you know, one dog might make a perfect match for me and might not be a perfect match for you.
Right.
There's the personality element, or dogality, I guess it might be more proper. I often joke when, you know, matching a veteran with a service dog. Um, you know, it's not first come first serve. Uh, I you know, many have heard of this match. You know, .com or eHarmony. I
Right.
said, we, instead of eHarmony, we use dHarmony. You know, your profiles have to match. Um, and that's a large part of the success of a service dog team. The veteran is getting to know the dogs that you have, and also getting to know the veterans very well that have applied to receive a dog, and matching them up correctly. There's an art to that. It's
I was actually just going to ask you that question. So, if you could elaborate on that, on what makes that art, what is that art? Because a lot of us who have had dogs as general public, whether that's through adoption or through we've bought the dog, even adoption, they try to pay you, but in reality, they're so full, and they'll just, as long as they see that you're a decent person, that you will take care of the dog, more often than not, they'll kind of they'll let you have the dog. And when you obviously buy a dog, you should buy it probably based on the breed, maybe the look, and some health characteristics. It's a good breeder and so on. But you don't really have that bonding process to say, oh, actually, that puppy's not right for you. If I were you, I would actually go for this one. I know it's not got the spotted eye that you want, but trust me, it's a better fit. We don't, the general public don't really have that. We kind of create the bond afterwards, after it's already in the house, where it's almost like, well, we have to create the bond now because me and you, buddy, there's no other
forced,
choice. So how do
forced
you
marriages.
yeah, exactly. So how do you create that bond, with confidence beforehand, and match these two individuals, and then knowing that, okay, now that these two are together, I'm fully confident that they'll work out, because it's not like a friendship where two humans can speak for each other and for themselves, and they can go, oh no, he's not my kind of guy, I don't really like him. With a dog, how do you gauge that?
Yeah, I think it's getting to know dogs really well, and again, getting to know the people that you're serving very well. Some of the most basic elements of the social styles are, how assertive is the person and how assertive is the dog. That's a key element. You wouldn't want a dog that's very assertive with a person who's not
Right.
assertive. The dog would walk all over them, and you wouldn't want the opposite either. You need to kind of capture that perfect, or well, relatively perfect balance of you want the person to be slightly more assertive than the dog,
Right.
and then there's a social element. How socially responsive is the dog and the person? You wouldn't want a person who's very very shy and reserved with a dog that is a party animal. You'd want some balance there as well.
Yeah.
But it's also the training of the veteran when they come to receive a dog, or even those who enter our training program to help train the dogs. I'm constantly um, challenging this idea that dogs are non-judgmental beings. I don't know who started that, but they obviously didn't have a dog because you know these dogs are they're very capable of trying to treat a new person as if they were a substitute teacher in junior high school. They're they and our dogs aren't in a position where they're we're not compulsively training them. We're not forcing them to do things or using fear based techniques. It's very much relationship based. Um, but the dogs will, there's a period of time where they will test who you are, and they will pretend like they're deaf, and they will pretend like they don't know their name or didn't hear, and that the veteran, when they come into our program, we're teaching them this. You have to be consistent, you have to be patient, but you also have to hold the dog accountable and
Right.
show the dog that that they know their name, and that they know the word sit. Um, and it's just that first few days really is most critical in establishing that respectful relationship with the dog. That the dogs develop respect for the person, um, but the dogs will try to have fun with them and test them out.
I'm
It's
really
part of
glad.
the
I'm
deal.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that point up, because when speaking to Meg Dolmer, she kind of raised a very similar point. She says, I don't know where people get this idea that dogs give unconditional love. She said, if you beat your dog every day of the week, there'll come a point where your dog goes, "That's it, I've had enough." Like, they're not going to carry on loving you, like, people. And I think the thing is, and I may be wrong here, but I think as most nations are dog loving, and so I think we try to romanticize dogs and make them out to be these beings. And so we think by saying, oh, they give unconditional love, and
Yeah.
this, that, and the other, we think that that actually puts them on a pedestal. But in reality, when you analyze that statement, what you're actually saying is the dog's stupid. Because if you give
Yes.
unconditional love, regardless of the behavior coming towards you as a person, you go, oh, that person's an idiot because they're in an abusive relationship and they're still loving this person. They need to kind of, they can't see the wood for the trees, for lack of a better expression. And I think that's the problem, is that we're trying to elevate dogs and their status, and I don't think we found the right terminology for it yet. But I'm really glad you brought that point up, because it's not that dogs give unconditional love, but I think the point that we try to get across as humans is maybe that the love that a dog gives feels more pure, because it
Yes.
it feels like it doesn't come with attachments or with criteria that need to be met. As long as you're a good person, that dog will love you no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're a homeless person or you have the biggest house in the world, the dog will love you. Whereas with humans, maybe we have a few criteria, a few boxes that need to be ticked before we're happy to fall in love with someone. But yeah, very good point, and I'm glad that you brought it up.
Yeah,
um
they're more forgiving, I would say,
yes,
and they have
exactly.
perspective than us. But
Yes.
you're exactly right. They are not stupid,
No.
and I would say they're non-judgmental in their ability to test everyone on the same playing field. You know,
Right.
they don't care if it's a general or a private, and they don't care if I'm the executive director.
Yeah.
It's it's very even, their playing field.
Exactly that. And you said at the start that you breed Labradors and Golden Retrievers, if I'm correct. What is it that made you choose that breed particularly? I mean, that's probably, I may be wrong here, but I think that's probably the most popular dog breed in terms of pets. Um, uh, but what is it that makes them good for service dogs and for veterans that need to reintegrate into society and overcome their PTSD?
Yeah, I think historically they've shown a higher level of success in becoming making the grade to become service dogs. They're relatively large, and for their size, they typically live a longer life. Um, they're very agile, and they're also, you know, have a long history of working with humans. So they have more natural tendencies to connect, I think, with people. Um, One of the benefits of these breeds, these floppy-eared breeds, is, you know, when they're going out into crowds and communities, they don't represent a threat. You know, they're typically perceived by the public as
Right.
friendly dogs, and we're working with veterans who are often struggling with reintegrating back in the community, that tend to isolate. And the last thing we want to do is give them a dog that's is promoting isolation, you know, where people are crossing the street because they see a dog that might be posing a threat. Um, I like the fact that the dog is really serves as a connection kind of topic and tool. You know, the dog actually pulls people towards the veteran, um, and that's a really important part of what these dogs can do for breaking down isolation, which is a deadly aspect of PTSD.
Hmm. I'm really glad that you brought that point up because it's something again that I spoke about with Meg, and it was we got a puppy in November of last year, and this is because I've always had dogs in my life, and so has my girlfriend. But we recently moved out to Spain, and in Spain you live in flats. My girlfriend and I, we both have had bigger dogs. She's had Labradors as she was growing up, and I've always had German Shepherds, and so to have that in a flat never seemed, in Spain it's accepted, but to us it kind of felt somewhat cruel. So we never really thought of getting a dog. But then circumstances with Corona changed, and basically my job is now almost full time at home. So I work from home almost completely, and I felt lonely throughout the day until my girlfriend came back, and I felt like I needed a dog, and I thought it's the perfect time to get one now that I can work from home and I can, be with that dog almost all day every day. There's no reason not to get one. So we decided to get a smaller breed, which is something new for us, and we got a Jack Russell. Anyway, as the COVID restrictions started to loosen up, and we were started to be allowed back out and to take him for walks, and people were out in bars and whatever else. One of the real good side effects, but that was completely unexpected from me, maybe naively, was the ability that that dog gave me to form a community. And I live in Madrid now, and most people think that if you live in a big city, it's very isolated. You have your friends, but that's it. You don't talk to the news agents or the local barista or whatever it might be, because you're in a big city and you're just a number, right? And now that I've got this dog, people don't really care about me, but they know that I'm the owner of the dog, and so I now know my local news agents, because my dog will run into that news agent because that news agent gives him cuddles every single morning. I now know my local pharmacist because the pharmacist leaves a bowl of water out on the as the Americans say, sidewalk, or on the path for our English listeners. And my dog, will have a little drink, and the pharmacist will come out and we'll have a little chat. And so through having a dog, I've created my own little community in the borough
Yes.
in which I live, and it's something that was completely unexpected to me. And I can't I can't overestimate the importance of that. And Meg spoke about how for the blind people, how that's such a big thing for them, because a lot often with blind people, the general public don't know how to interact, because you might say a faux pas. You might say, "Oh, did you see the match last night?" And then you go, "Oh shit, of course they didn't see
Yeah,
the match.
yeah,
They're blind."
yeah.
Whereas whether you've got a dog, you can talk to the blind person about the dog. And I imagine for a service, for a veteran, that must be so important, that bridge with from themselves to the general public, that allows them to start off talking about the dog, but maybe eventually helps them integrate into that society and form community once again.
Yes, absolutely. And the fact that for service dogs, that's a large part of the training process is, getting them to feel comfortable and knowing that, sit means sit everywhere. You have to take them out into different environments. And by engaging our veterans who tend to avoid going out into public places, but now they feel the sense of a duty or mission to help train this dog for one of their fellow vets. It's a motivation to get them out in the public, and exactly as you've described, when they go into the store, and you can't isolate when you have a beautiful golden retriever with you in public.
Yeah,
And it's a catalyst for social interactions, but it's also the dog also acts as a buffer, because all the topic is going to be about that dog or their dog, and they're going to pull out their phone and show you the pictures of their dog at home.
right,
So it's predictable what the conversation is going to be. And our veterans, they're not hearing, oh, what did you do overseas? And it makes the world a friendlier place and an easier place to connect to, because they have these dogs out in public. And what's also interesting is, in training a service dog, we teach the dogs to accept whatever may happen, the noises and the crowds, the dumpster doors slamming, these loud cars backfiring. As trainers, we teach the dogs to welcome those noises and events. As a matter of fact, if a loud noise happens, our dogs are typically looking up to see if they're going to get a treat. And for veterans those are triggering events, those loud noises, which takes them into a place where they're thinking about an IED rather than walking down the sidewalk. The responsibility that we're sharing with them to teach these dogs that the world is a safe place, that you make light of it. When a dumpster door slams or a siren goes off, we're acting silly and giving the dog a treat.
right.
And so these veterans are put into a position to help train these dogs where they have to challenge these intrusive thoughts in that moment, and stay out of here and
Mm,
be centered and mindful, I guess is another way of putting it, being aware of what the dog needs, because they are the ones being helpful in teaching the dog that the world is a safe place.
yeah.
They have to challenge thoughts in their own head that might not be.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And there's actually some really interesting research that I came across a while ago, which basically stated that, or found, that when we are told to care for someone else. Oh, sorry, a fire truck just driving by there. Lovely.
You're throwing a party and giving your dog a treat.
That when we are told to care for someone else, we take better care. So that what that means is, if a doctor says, right, you've got to give your dog or your nan or whatever it may be this packet of pills, and it has to last over 2 weeks, and you have to make sure they take every pill for those 2 weeks. On average, we're more likely to do that because we feel a duty of care to that person or to that animal. Whereas if that same doctor, gave us the exact same prescription but for ourselves and said, right, you need to take these pills for 2 weeks, if we're feeling better after 5 or 6 days, we might just go, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter, and leave it, and we won't take all the pills that the doctors told us. So we take less care of ourselves, but more care of others, and that's kind of what you're speaking to there. Is that if you told a veteran that they have to do this work this internal work by themselves. They might feel like they don't have to, or they might give up when it starts to get hard. But when they feel a responsibility for this animal, and not only for this animal, but for the service, that for the veteran that's gonna take this animal on once it's been fully trained. Now all of a sudden, the work isn't about them. It's not a selfish motive. It's completely
Yes.
selfless, and that encourages them to do the work for others. But in actual fact, you're doing the work for yourself without realizing.
I think that's the key, is that they're doing this for one of their fellow veterans. And that is such a powerful component of their lives. You know, I can't imagine a more important role for someone to play than being part of a unit or platoon that your lives are at stake. If everyone has to be cohesive and do their job, and everyone has a shared responsibility to keep that unit safe. In essence, I think that's the ultimate sense of purpose. I can't imagine something more powerful than that. And when they're pulled away from that unit or that social structure, and they're now hospitalized to get treatment, it seems that that would create such a void
Hmm.
in their sense of purpose.
Hmm.
And that's a large part of how this program, when I designed it, was to, although it's not going to fill that void, but it may help to fill some sense of that purpose. Even if you're in a hospital getting treatment, that you can still do something important and tangible to take care of one of your battle buddies. I think that's plays a large part in the success that I've seen over the years, and which really compels veterans to do things that they would never do this for themselves. They would rather stay home and avoid that stress of going out in the crowds and places.
Yeah.
But now they have a mission, a sense of purpose, and training a service dog requires a lot of or patience. I mentioned patience, but also the communication tools that you have to employ. You have to be able to have an assertive type tone. You have to be able to tell the dog what you would like them to do. But one of the most challenging parts of service dog training is, especially for us, for guys, but let alone combat vets that have emotional numbing, is you have to get your very happy voice going.
Right.
I call
Right.
it. And if you know who Richard Simmons is, um, it's just the Minnie Mouse high pitched tone that to train a dog successfully, you have to master that.
Yeah.
And I've had many Marine drill instructors who are very good at sounding assertive, but then all of a sudden I'm saying, well, you have to get your high pitched happy voice here.
And they're like,
and
"What's that?"
and what's that? Yeah, I'm emotionally numb. I don't sound like that. And the conversation usually is, you don't have to be happy, and you don't have to talk to your buddies this way. But
Right.
to train this dog to be an effective service dog, you're going to have to pretend to sound happy.
Yeah.
And if they don't put effort into it, they won't get very far in training the dog. But if they follow this directive and what they're being coached to do, the dogs respond, and then they feel successful in teaching this dog something. So it reinforces itself. And there's a concept called "fake it until you make it," right?
Yeah.
And here's a mission based reason to fake sounding happy, and then it's reinforced by the dog's response. And one of the most meaningful things that I've heard over the years was having a Marine drill instructor share that he felt that the program had saved his marriage, because he had a 3-year-old at home that he was being harsh with because he couldn't turn off what he did at work. He was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. But through the training of the dog and the patience that he learned and this high pitched voice, he started applying that to his 3-year-old and said that it had saved his marriage. It taught him how to reconnect with his son on a 3-year-old level. Um, and I think about that often because, I think what's missed, greatly missed, is this idea that we, our militaries, they train service members very, very effectively, and they're training them experientially,
Mm,
and they're trained to be reactive, and they're trained to be able to function without emotions getting into their, interfering with what they have to do in a combat zone, and that keeps them alive. But they're coming home trained as reactive and somewhat emotionally blunted warfighters, and it seems ridiculous to expect that they could come home trained as that warfighter and expect to be that same loving, patient mom or dad that they were prior to that training,
right,
without some retraining, of course.
right.
You know, we train, our military trains service members for each mission. Everything's has its own nuance, and they're trained for whatever that mission is going to entail. I think we need to do a better job collectively, in helping to retrain our warfighters to be able to come home to the mission back home with their families and their kids. I think many, many people would benefit, over generations, I would say, would benefit by finding ways to experientially get, our veterans to be able to emote and be able to be patient again.
Mm. No, it's a good point you make because I think that's, from the general public side, we have this fascination and obviously complete adoration and respect for our military men and women because it takes a different kind of human being to be able to 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 live in those circumstances, and not to live the citizen lifestyle. But like you said, once they come back, they're no longer in those wartime circumstances, and like it takes different people where you now need to come back to that citizen lifestyle and that citizen way of thinking because otherwise you won't survive, because you have to be emotive and you have to feel things again. And I think that's a really, really good point you make, and I've definitely felt it with the dog that, yeah, like you said, you have to put on a stupid a stupid voice, and once you do it after the third time of doing it with the dog, you do actually feel better in yourself, even though you
Yes.
just told them to be a good boy because they've sat down or whatever. But you actually feel a bit lighter, just a little bit happier, and it's a stupid voice that you would never use with a human unless they're under the age of 5, because you'd be called patronizing and you probably get a slap. But with the dog, you do have to use it, and you have to use it in public as well, not just in the comfort and the safety of your own home. And it is a big difference. It does make you more emotive, and I think it makes you more aware as well. Because especially when you have a puppy, that they notice everything and everything's new for them, and every smell, every sound, every texture is all new. And when you're, even I'm young and 25, but you get used to these things. The crunch of the autumn leaves under your foot is nothing new to you, so you just take it for granted. But when you're taking your dog out for a walk, all of those things are just like bewildering to the dog, and they take such interest in it. And then you kind of take interest in these things again, and it makes you really happy because I think it makes you aware of things that you've taken for granted, and you become more appreciative of really simple things thanks to the dog, I think, because they point it out to you like, oh my god, isn't this amazing? You're like, actually, it is amazing, but I've just, like you said, I've become emotionally blunted to it.
Yeah. People talk about mindfulness, and I think, paying attention to your dog, training your dog, to me, it's an incredible practice of mindfulness.
Mm. And do you think, you're kind of on the frontier of this, not research, well, I guess research, yeah, of the
Yes.
power that dogs have. And do you think that we're, how can I put this, that we're underestimating, or that we have so much more to learn and more to uncover in terms of the potential that dogs, and maybe not just dogs, maybe let's branch out, that animals in general have, um, and that we're really only scratching the surface.
Yeah, I think we could be a lot smarter about, this. There's a saying that, never overlook an answer to a problem that appears to be too simple. It happens all the time. I think as we strive for high tech
Yeah.
everything, and we're not seeing the dog underneath our nose.
Yeah.
It's my experience over the last 30 years. I've watched veterans who had tried every medication under the sun and couldn't sleep because of night terrors and et cetera. Having a dog in their bed, a very nice, sweet dog in their bed, getting 6, 8 hours of sleep for the first time in years, is really pretty significant accomplishment. Um, and maybe a bit off topic, but dogs, their scent, their olfactory systems are, when the last I've heard, 1.5 parts per trillion that they can detect. They've co-evolved with humans for over 30,000 years.
Mm.
Imagine what they've learned about humans over 30,000 years as the ultimate chemical sensing device at
Mm.
our side,
Yeah.
growing with us. I've learned, and I believe that dogs really uh, know a lot more about us than we'll ever know about them. I think that they clearly know when we're in distress, even without behavioral cues. I've watched dogs show a propensity to identify humans who were a threat without any observable patterns of behavior that a trained social worker could pick up on.
Mm.
Uh, I, I, I think that's the most important aspect of dogs that we need to really learn or understand fully. Um, 'Cause I think they could help us know ourselves much, much, much more deeply, and I think they could help us survive if
Yeah.
we would just um,
I,
work
it's a
with
great
them a
way.
little bit more.
It's a great way to put it that they know us much better than we know them, and I think that point that you make, the historical point, is something that Meg, points. She pointed out in our conversation. She definitely, at pains, she points it out in her work and in her book, is that these are lifelong, generational partners, and that I think, like you said, we're always looking for high tech, this newest innovations. What else can we do? AI, yada yada yada. And by doing so, I sometimes feel like we're distancing ourselves from ancient wisdoms, and now we're
Yeah.
trying to come across them again, rediscover ancient wisdoms as if they were new things, as if they are innovative methods or learnings, when in reality it's something that probably our predecessors from thousands of years ago would take for granted. But we've just become so detached from that, be that in the natural world with plants or with animals, like in your field. I wanted
Yes.
wondered with these veterans, they create such a special bond with their service animals, and I think we all love our pets, but I feel like to really to have a dog that helps you get over PTSD, to have a dog that helps you reintegrate into society, I have to imagine that bond is stronger than any bond a normal citizen can have with their pet in reality. And yet with that, whenever one of our pets dies, it is like a family member dying, and it's really hard to get over. How is it for a veteran? Because I imagine that must be the same feeling but amplified by 100, because now their partner in crime is no longer there. Do they get a service dog straight away? Is it like, right, this one I need one now, otherwise I don't know how I'm going to cope? Or do they almost find it disloyal to the image, to the memory of their first service dog, and does it take them a while to kind of accept that maybe another pet is what they need?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and it's just awful for anyone. It's
Of
it's
course.
it's equally awful. In this case, for a veteran with their service dog, it's like the prescription. And we do a lot of educating our veterans to understand what the dog is bringing to the table as far as the oxytocin release, and how, so they fully understand what the dog's presence means and is doing, you know underneath the surface, so they get a full appreciation. And by doing that, if when the dog passes, yes, we put them to the front of the line for a successor dog. But I think being aware that it helps with this sense of loyalty. Should I get a dog right now? Yes, you should, because this is not about a loyalty thing. It's about your oxytocin levels and your stress levels. And yes, this dog is not going to be the same as that dog, and you wouldn't want to compare them. But your mental health and your sleep and your stress levels, all of that are it's much deeper than a loyalty thing. This
Right.
is a mental health thing
Yeah. And
and physical health.
of course, of course. Before I let you go, I mean, on the podcast, we're a sucker for a success story, and I was just wondering if you had a particular story in mind. You have to give the name, if they for privacy reasons, but a particular story in mind or couple where it kind of really demonstrates what it is that Warrior Canine Connection does, but also the power and the potential of these service dogs and their life changing abilities for these veterans.
Yeah, that's boy. There's so many, so many. If I was going to pick, well, it's so hard to even pick one. But I had a an Army staff sergeant that came to us to get a dog um, for his kids. And as I talked to him, he was describing, he'd been through, he had three children, age 5 to 12, and had been to three different family therapists, and things weren't getting better. He was fine at work. He trained soldiers, but at home, he would, rather than yelling at his kids and losing his patience, he would isolate up in his room, and that wasn't going well. And he was aware that his children were picking up his PTSD. Their legs were bouncing, um, and as we spoke, you know, we discussed this, you know, fact that he had gone through all of this effective training that the Army had put him through. The reactivity, the emotional numbing aspect of it. And whenever we laid it out, I laid it out with, hey, you were trained really well. We're not going to just give you a dog. You have to, go through training to get one of our dogs, and you'll have to, practice this happy voice, and you'll have to practice patience. But whenever we discussed, basically maybe you were trained really well by the Army to be that warfighter, it was a different perspective than he had heard. It wasn't, hey, you have this disorder, you're sick, you're mentally ill. It was more palatable for him to accept that he was trained really well. And the training, the Army put him through was not the greatest training for dealing with young children. And it opened up other paths for him. And to watch this family, as we coached the father to practice his Minnie Mouse voice, and when those kids heard their dad sounding happy for the first time, to be in that room and watch their eyes, that there was hope because they heard what dad sounded like prior to deployment. And when we placed the dog with them, and I went to check on the dog the next day, first overnight, and I went to shake his hand, and he pushed my hand out of the way and gave me a big hug and said, "You turned me back into a hugger." Was just an amazing moment. And I've watched, like I said, watching someone get sleep for the first night in a VA hospital when they had a dog stay overnight in the room, and just that sense of like, wow, things can be back to normal. There is a chance for me to be able to function.
Hmm.
Um, it's watching that hope, come back. Or what, we had a Navy SEAL at Walter Reed that he wouldn't leave his room, and he'd been through 5 different hospitals and over 3 years, and his wife was told to arrange assisted living because it wasn't getting better.
Wow.
And this Navy SEAL, when we took this 6-month-old golden retriever and said, we need to train this dog to become a service dog, As he puts it years later, he said, "You gave me this no fail mission. You know, I'm a Navy SEAL. You know, I have to get the right words. I have to get the timing." And from not leaving his room to working with his dog all throughout the hospital in a matter of a couple of weeks, and then taking the dog with our trainer on the train, the metro, down to the next town to have lunch, and to watch these just incredible doctors, just humbled by everything they had tried everything, and now all of a sudden this sense of mission inspired this Navy SEAL to do something, to engage back in his treatment. He'd given up, and frankly, a lot of the veterans I worry most about are the ones that don't think they deserve to get better. Those who are really struggling with survivor's guilt, that are torturing themselves, or punishing themselves for, you know, what decisions they had to make or things that have happened, and they internalize it so much that it's destroying their life, and it will continue to destroy their life until you find a way to flank that resistance to treatment. And our lead doc that works for Warrior Canine Connection, he's a acclaimed psychiatrist, Dr. Kaufman, said that he calls it the Trojan dog program. You know, it's we don't focus on, here, train this dog because it'll be good for you. It's, help us train this dog because we need these dogs trained to help other veterans. And that really is the secret sauce in many situations, where those veterans who will do anything, they'll crawl through broken glass and fire to take care of another veteran, but
Right.
they won't do things to help themselves. And you have to flank that. You have
Yeah.
to get around that.
Tapping into that sense of duty, right? To
Yes,
ultimately
it's
help
key.
themselves.
It's key because all the king's horses and all the king's men, if
Yeah.
that veteran doesn't want to, or isn't engaged in the process, it's not going to happen.
Right. Perfect. And how? Just the last question for me is: how do you see the Warrior Canine Connection moving forwards? What's the how do you see it evolving as time goes on?
Yeah, I think that this model is, the uniqueness of the model is that with one dog, we can have many veterans benefit from even one dog over the 2 years it takes to train them. There are hundreds of service dog programs around the world, um, that I would like to help spread this model so that they can learn from our lessons, and our experience, and adopt this model, because it exponentially increases the impact that any organization, any one dog can have. Um, that's really the future I see. Um, it it would be nice to know that one dog is not just helping one person, but maybe dozens and dozens.
Beautiful. That that
Um,
that
that's what
compound
that's what
effect.
we're through the research that we're involved with, and just through manualizing this and capturing the lessons learned over the last years. It's We hope to be able to share that, and grow the impact through sharing those lessons.
Great stuff. Well, Rick, I really appreciate you for giving us your time and for coming on, and the work, and obviously for the work that you're doing. It's really great stuff. We'll put all the links to the Warrior Canine Connection in the episode notes and the show notes. So anyone who wants to find out more, please feel free to click on those, and there's all the information on the website. But thank you once again for coming on. I really, really do appreciate it, and keep up the
And
good
so
work.
one thing that I would be kick myself for not mentioning is
Please.
we have a live puppy cam on our website. I would urge people to tune in and watch the live puppy cam.
Right.
Um, you know, this past year has been just a fiasco for many, and mostly for our nursing, medical, community. And we've been receiving a lot of emails from nurses around the country that in the COVID wards are, they have the puppy cam at their nurses station, and they're saying that it's offered a lot of stress relief for them. And first time they're seeing their nurses smile in months when they see the puppy cam. So watching the puppies is an oxytocin boost for everyone. So I just hope everyone can benefit, who needs to benefit from that.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, because I wasn't aware of that myself. So yeah, well, there you have it, folks. Anyone who wants to watch the puppy cam and get in that oxytocin, you'll find that on the website as well. So thank you once again, Rick. I really do appreciate you coming on.
So my pleasure. Take care.
Thank you.
Good luck with your Jack Russell. He'll keep you.
Thank
He'll
you.
keep you
I
motivated.
need it. I'll definitely need it.
He'll teach you a lot of.
Hi, guys. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week. But until then, keep safe and have a good one.